P.S. These visuals are AI generated. Why? Because hiring actual Simpsons animators costs more than Homer's lifetime donut budget. But the financial advice? Hand-delivered by Lisa. Probably. Now focus.
Welcome back to Simpsons Finance. If Homer can understand it, so can you. Have you ever stared at your bank account and wondered, am I normal for my age? Or how much should I actually have saved right now? Maybe you just got a promotion. Or maybe you're feeling behind. Either way, that question, what should my net worth be at this stage of life, is one of the most common and most stressful questions in personal finance. Today, we're going to answer it. From your 20s all the way to your 60s, we're going to walk through what the data says you should aim for. We'll look at median net worth numbers by age group, break down what those numbers actually mean, and help you figure out whether you're on track for the retirement you want. And here's the thing. These numbers aren't pulled out of thin air. They come from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, which is conducted every 3 years and is widely considered the most comprehensive look at American household wealth. We'll be focusing on median net worth. That's the middle point, where half of people have more and half have less. And one very important detail, these numbers exclude home equity. We'll explain why later. Now, before we dive in, let's be real for a second. Everyone's situation is different. Your income, your career path, where you live, whether you have kids, how much debt you carry, all of that affects what normal looks like for you. So these numbers aren't a report card. They're not a pass-fail test. They're a benchmark, a way to check your bearings and ask yourself, am I moving in the right direction? Because at the end of the day, financial freedom isn't about hitting some arbitrary number. It's about building a life where money isn't a source of stress. And the only way to get there is to understand where you stand and where you're going. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about your 20s. Your 20s. Build the foundation. Let's start with a quick definition. Net worth is simple. It's everything you own minus everything you owe. Add up your cash, your investments, your retirement accounts, any property you have. Then subtract your credit card debt, student loans, car loans, any other money you owe. What's left is your net worth. It's the truest measure of your financial position. For people aged 25 to 29, the median net worth is about $30,000. That's the number from the most recent Fed data. And if you're looking at that number and thinking, I'm not even close, take a deep breath. Because here's the truth. Your 20s are not about piling up a fortune. They're about something much more important. Your 20s are about building the foundation. Let me say that again. In your 20s, the goal is not to have a high net worth. The goal is to set yourself up so that in your 30s, 40s, and beyond, your net worth can grow naturally and sustainably. It's like building a house. You don't start by putting up walls. You start by pouring a foundation. And if you get the foundation right, everything else is easier. So what does that foundation look like? I want to walk you through 4 habits that if you build them in your 20s, will completely change your financial future. Habit number 1, save consistently. I'm not talking about saving whatever's left at the end of the month. I'm talking about paying yourself first. Ideally, you want to save 10 to 15% of your pre-tax income. That might sound like a lot, but hear me out. This money isn't just for retirement. It's for building an emergency fund, usually 3 to 6 months of expenses. It's for saving up for a down payment on a house. It's for starting an investment account outside of retirement. And yes, it's for retirement too. Now, I know 10 to 15% isn't always realistic right out of the gate. Maybe you're dealing with student loans or living in an expensive city. That's okay. Start where you are. If you can only save 5%, save 5%. The important thing is to build the habit. Make it automatic. Set up a transfer from your checking account to your savings account every single month, so you never even see the money. Then, every time you get a raise, increase that percentage by a point or two. Over time, it adds up. Habit number 2, don't spend everything you earn. This sounds obvious, but it's the most common mistake I see. You start earning decent money, maybe your first real job out of college. Suddenly, you have a paycheck that feels huge compared to what you're used to, and it's tempting to upgrade everything. New car, new apartment, new clothes, new gadgets. And before you know it, you're living paycheck to paycheck on a salary that should be plenty. Look, I'm not saying you should never enjoy your money. I've bought things I didn't strictly need, and I don't regret most of them. Life is meant to be lived. But there's a difference between occasional treats and lifestyle inflation that eats up every dollar you earn. The key is to be intentional. Spend on what matters to you and cut back on what doesn't. Habit number 3, make a budget. I know, budget sounds like a restriction. But here's the thing. A budget isn't about limiting what you can spend. It's about knowing where your money's going so you can make choices that align with your values. I still review my budget every single month, not because I'm cheap, because I want to be intentional. A budget shows you your real after-tax income. It shows you what you're spending on rent, on food, on entertainment, and it helps you spot areas where you might be overspending without realizing it. If you start budgeting in your 20s, you'll have an enormous advantage over your peers. Most people never do this. They just wing it. And winging it works until it doesn't. Habit number 4. Kill high-interest debt. This one's non-negotiable. If you have credit card debt at 18, 20, 25% interest, that debt is an emergency. Paying it off is the best investment you can possibly make, because no investment is guaranteed to return 20%. But paying off a credit card, that's a guaranteed 20% return. Some people think, I'll invest while carrying debt, and my investments will outgrow the interest. That's a dangerous gamble. The math almost never works in your favor. Pay off the high-interest stuff first, then invest. So for your 20s, the target net worth is around $30,000. But honestly, if you're in your 20s and you're building these habits, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. The number matters less than the foundation. Your 30s, start accelerating. Now we move into your 30s. This is where things start to get real. You're past the entry-level years. You have some experience, maybe some promotions, hopefully some income growth. And the targets start to climb. The Fed data splits your 30s into 2 buckets. For ages 30 to 34, the median net worth is about $50,000 to $60,000. For ages 35 to 39, it's around $100,000. There's also a common rule of thumb that many financial planners use. By age 30, you should have 3 times your annual salary saved for retirement. So if you're earning $60,000, that's $180,000 in retirement accounts, IRA or other retirement accounts. Now, here's why your 30s are so critical. You still have decades until retirement. That means time is on your side, but inflation is on the march too. If your money isn't growing, it's shrinking in real terms. $1 today will buy less in 20 years. So in your 30s, you need to shift from just saving to investing. Let's talk about what that means. First, think long-term. When you invest, you're not trying to get rich quick. You're not trying to time the market. You're playing a long game. And the simplest, most effective way to play that game is with low-cost index funds. Consider this. From 1980 to 2022, a $10,000 investment in the S&P 500 would have grown to about $1.1 million. That's the power of long-term compounding. But here's the kicker. If you had missed just the 5 best days in the market over that entire period, your $1.1 million would have shrunk to $670,000. 5 days out of thousands. That's why trying to time the market is a losing game. No one knows when those best days will happen. The only way to capture them is to stay invested. Second, diversify. You've heard the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's cliché because it's true. If you put all your money into a single stock and that company goes bankrupt, you lose everything. But if you spread your money across hundreds of companies, across different industries, different countries, different asset classes, then no single failure can wipe you out. That's what index funds do. A total stock market index fund gives you exposure to thousands of companies. You're betting on the economy as a whole, not on any one business. Third, watch your fees. This is the one that people overlook. A fund that charges 1% might not sound like much, but over 30 years, that 1% can eat up a huge chunk of your returns. A $10,000 investment growing at 7% with no fees becomes about $76,000 after 30 years. With a 1% fee, it becomes about $57,000. That's $19,000 gone, just to fees. Low-cost funds like VOO or VTI charge around 0.03 to 0.04%. That's $3 to $4 per year on a $10,000 investment. The difference matters. Now, there's one trap in your 30s that I want to warn you about: borrowing from retirement accounts. It can be tempting, especially if you have an unexpected expense or want to buy a house. Your 401k balance looks like a pile of cash just sitting there. But here's the problem. When you take money out, you lose decades of compounding on that amount. And if you don't pay it back on time, you also owe taxes and penalties. This is exactly why you need an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses in a savings account means you never have to touch your retirement money when life throws you a curveball. If you can, try to increase your savings rate in your 30s to 15 or even 20% of your income, including any employer match in your 401k. The more you save now, the less you have to scramble later. So for your 30s, the targets are around $50,000 to $60,000 by 34 and $100,000 by 39. Learn to invest, keep fees low, and let compounding do its thing.
Your 40s, peak earning years. By your 40s, you've been in the workforce for nearly 2 decades. You're likely at or near your peak earning years, and the targets start to get serious. For ages 40 to 44, the median net worth is around $150,000. For ages 45 to 49, it's around $240,000. The retirement rule of thumb: by age 40, you should have 3 times your annual salary saved. So if you're earning $80,000, that's $240,000 in retirement accounts. Now, here's what's interesting about your 40s. This is when the gap between those who planned ahead and those who didn't starts to widen. The habits you built in your 20s and 30s are now paying off or not. There are a few things to focus on in this decade. First, maximize your income. This is your highest earning window, and one of the biggest mistakes people make is staying too long at a company that doesn't value you. There's data on this. If you stay at the same company for more than 2 years, unless you're getting consistent 10 to 15% raises, your salary is likely falling behind. People who switch jobs strategically often earn 50% more over their careers than those who stay put. Now, I'm not saying you should job hop every 2 years. There's value in stability, in relationships, in work you believe in. But if you're undervalued, it's worth exploring your options. Your 40s are not the time to coast. Second, stick to your budget. I know, budgeting sounds like something you do in your 20s when money's tight. But in your 40s, you're probably spending more than ever. Mortgage payments, kids' activities, maybe private school, car payments, vacations. All of that is fine if it's intentional, but it's easy to let lifestyle creep take over. You earn more, so you spend more, and before you know it, your savings rate hasn't budged in a decade. Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to accumulate $1 million over the next 20 years. At a 7.5% annual return, you'd need to invest about $2,000 per month. If you're earning the median income for this age group, around $75,000 to $80,000, that means a savings rate of about 30 to 35%. If you invest in something like the S&P 500 with a historical average return around 10%, you'd need about $1,500 per month, which is a savings rate of about 25%. The point is, if you don't know these numbers, if you're just saving whatever feels comfortable, you might be way off track. So run the numbers, figure out what you need, and adjust your budget accordingly. Third, think about your kids and college. If you have children, their college years are probably looming, and college costs have been rising faster than inflation for decades. There are tax-advantaged accounts like 529 plans that can help. But here's the thing. You can borrow for college. You cannot borrow for retirement. So make sure your own retirement savings are on track before you oversave for your kids' education. Your 40s are also a good time to revisit your estate planning. If you don't have a will, get one. If you have life insurance, make sure it's enough. These aren't fun topics, but they're part of being a responsible adult. Your 50s, the final stretch. Now we get to your 50s. This is the last real window to make significant progress before retirement, and the targets reflect that urgency.
For ages 50 to 54, the median net worth is around $240,000 to $250,000. For ages 55 to 59, it's around $300,000 or more. The retirement benchmarks: by age 50, you should have 6 times your salary saved. By 55, 8 times. If you're on track, great. If you're behind, don't panic, but do take action. Because in your 50s, you have 2 powerful tools that younger people don't. First, the catch-up contribution. Once you turn 50, the IRS allows you to contribute extra money to your retirement accounts beyond the normal limits. For 2025, the catch-up amount for a 401k is $7,500. For people aged 60 to 63, it's even higher, $11,250. That's significant. If you're behind, this is your chance to make up ground. Max out your 401k. Add the catch-up. If you have an IRA, do the same. Second, you can get serious about paying down debt. Ideally, you want to enter retirement with as little debt as possible. If you have a mortgage, you might choose to pay it off early. If you have car loans or credit card debt, now is the time to eliminate them. One thing to watch out for in your 50s is lifestyle inflation. You might feel like you've earned the right to spend, and you have, but don't let that derail your retirement plans. This is the decade where the choices you make have outsized impact because there's less time for compounding to fix mistakes. Also, start thinking seriously about when you want to retire. Not in a vague way, in a concrete, numbers-driven way. What age, what lifestyle? How much will you spend each year? The more specific you are, the easier it is to plan. And don't forget about healthcare. If you retire before 65, you'll need to cover your own health insurance until Medicare kicks in. That can be expensive. Factor it into your plans. Your 60s, ready for retirement. Finally, we arrive at your 60s. For many people, this is the decade when work becomes optional, and the numbers reflect that transition. For ages 60 to 64, the median net worth is around $550,000 to $600,000. For ages 65 to 69, it dips slightly to around $550,000. Why the dip? Because this is when people start drawing down their savings. You're no longer adding new money from work. You're spending what you've accumulated. So a slight decline is completely normal. The retirement rule of thumb: by age 67, the full retirement age for Social Security for most people, you should have about 10 times your final salary saved. So if you were earning $65,000 at the end of your career, you'd want around $650,000 in retirement accounts. But let's be clear, that number is just a starting point. Your actual need depends on your lifestyle. If you're moving to a lower cost area, you might need less. If you plan to travel extensively or have expensive hobbies, you might need more. And healthcare costs in retirement are a wild card. They can vary enormously depending on your health and where you live. One of the biggest decisions you'll make in your 60s is when to claim Social Security. You can start as early as 62, but if you do, your monthly benefit will be permanently reduced by as much as 30% compared to waiting for full retirement age. If you wait until 70, your benefit increases by about 8% per year beyond full retirement age. That's a guaranteed inflation-adjusted increase for life. So, which is right? It depends. If you're in poor health or really need the money, claiming early might make sense. If you're healthy and have other resources to live on, waiting can pay off enormously, especially if you live a long time. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but it's worth running the numbers and thinking about your own situation. Also, in your 60s, you'll need to think about required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Once you turn 73, the IRS requires you to start taking money out of your traditional retirement accounts, whether you need it or not. That can push you into a higher tax bracket if you're not careful. Roth accounts don't have RMDs, which is one reason they're so valuable. And finally, this is the decade to enjoy what you've built. You spent 40 years working and saving. Now it's time to actually live the life you planned for. Don't be afraid to spend, within reason. You've earned it. Putting it all together. So let's bring this all together. Here are the median net worth targets by age based on the Federal Reserve data. Mid-20s, around $30,000. Early 30s, $50,000 to $60,000. Late 30s, around $100,000. Early 40s, $150,000. Late 40s, $240,000. Early 50s, $250,000. Late 50s, $300,000 or more. Early 60s, $550,000 to $600,000. Late 60s, $550,000. And the retirement savings multiples. By 30, 1 times your salary. By 40, 3 times your salary. By 50, 6 times your salary. By 55, 8 times your salary. By retirement, around 67, 10 times your salary. Now, a few important caveats. First, these numbers exclude home equity. In the US, home equity is a huge part of most families' net worth. If you own a home, your actual net worth could be much higher than these numbers suggest. But the Fed excludes it because home equity isn't liquid. You can't easily spend it without selling your house. So when you're planning for retirement, it's wise to look at financial assets separately. Second, these are medians. Half of people have more, half have less. If you're below the median, that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you have work to do. But so do millions of other people. Third, your personal situation matters more than any benchmark. If you have a pension, you might need less in savings. If you plan to work longer, you might need less. If you have expensive goals, you might need more. These numbers are a starting point, not a final judgment. And if you're behind, don't get discouraged. I've been there. I've had years where I felt like I was barely treading water. Financial journeys are not linear. There are setbacks, surprises, and seasons where progress feels slow. The important thing is to start where you are. If you're in your 40s and have nothing saved, start now. If you're in your 50s and behind, use catch-up contributions. If you're in your 60s and worried, consider working a few more years or adjusting your lifestyle.
Wealth building is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about consistency over time, not perfection in any given year. Be patient with yourself. Stay focused. And remember, every dollar you save is a gift to your future self. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. I know it was long, but I wanted to give you a complete picture. Not just the numbers, but the context around them. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe. We've got a lot more coming. And if you want to go deeper, check out the links in the description for more resources on retirement planning and investing. I'll see you in the next video.